I hit the floor so fast that I barely realized the impact before the darkness started closing in around my eyes. My name is Olivia Carter, and I swear on every breath left in my body that I did not imagine the needle grasped in my stepfather Richard Hale's trembling hand. He injected me with something strong enough to make the world melt into a blur. The cold wooden floor pressed against my cheek, and all I could hear was my own heartbeat slamming inside my skull like a warning siren telling me to stay awake. Richard knelt beside me, his face twisted with a blend of rage and excitement. "You see, Olivia, this is the only way to protect you. You are unstable, dangerous even." His hand smoothed my hair almost gently, almost fatherly, if not for the venom in his eyes. He wanted me unconscious. He wanted me helpless. He wanted me gone. I tried to scream for my mother, but my mouth refused to obey. The drug raced through my veins like fire spreading in dry grass, shutting down everything it touched. I clawed at the floor, desperate to anchor myself to reality, but reality was slipping away grain by grain. Richard's voice dropped to a whisper, low, chilling, rehearsed. "No judge will question me when I tell them you tried to hurt yourself. You know you have always been a burden." He said the word burden like it was my name, like that was all I had ever been to him. The man who married my widowed mother when I was already an adult came into my life and immediately tried to own it. Now he wanted to erase it. Richard pulled a phone from his pocket, his tone suddenly filled with false panic. "Hello, 911. My stepdaughter injected herself with something. She is delusional. I think she might harm us. Please, hurry." The floor beneath me felt like ice, and the lights above scattered into sharp stars. My breathing turned into wet, ragged gasps. I fought to keep my eyes open, to move, to speak, to survive. He leaned closer until his lips nearly brushed my ear. "You will be declared crazy, Olivia. You will sign everything over so your mother and I can take care of things properly, and then you will be someone else's problem." Tears burned but could not fall. I wanted to tell him that I knew what he was doing, that I knew about the forged documents and the medical records he had altered, that I had proof, that I would fight him until my last breath. But my muscles refused to respond. My vision dissolved into smears of color. My lungs begged for air. I was slipping under. My mother's voice echoed somewhere behind him, terrified, trembling. "Richard, what did you do?" He snapped back a cold command. "Stay back, Joanne. She is not well. She could hurt you." He was already spinning the story, painting me as the monster. Gaslighting was his craft, and he was a master. A shadow moved in front of me. Richard's boots. He nudged me with his foot, watching me fade like a scientist observing an experiment he had complete control over. My fingers shook, searching the ground for anything I could hold, anything to remind myself that I was still alive. I could not let him win. Not like this. Not without a fight. My stepfather thought he had broken me with one injection. He thought he had silenced my voice. He thought he had already won. He had no idea that even as his lies thickened around me like smoke, I was still fighting, still breathing, still clinging to life. And I promised myself in that final flicker of consciousness that I would drag him into the light and destroy him before he destroyed me. My fingers curled weakly, determined to hold on to life and justice. When consciousness finally clawed its way back into my mind, it came in blurry, violent flashes. A bright light burned my eyes. My head pounded so hard I thought my skull would crack open. A stiff blanket scratched against my arms, and the air reeked of antiseptic. I was alive, but trapped in a reality that Richard had crafted for me. I heard whispers first, then footsteps, then a woman's voice too soft, too fake. "She is awake." Should I call the doctor? The doctor. Of course. I was in a hospital. Exactly where Richard wanted me. I forced my eyes to open and saw the outline of two nurses standing near the doorway, their expressions unreadable. One of them approached with a practiced smile. "Olivia, try not to move too quickly. You have been through a traumatic episode." Episode! The word lodged in my throat like a stone. What did they think happened to me? I tried to sit up, but my body resisted shaking with weakness. My voice was shredded, but I pushed the words out. Where is my mom? Where is Richard? The nurse exchanged a look with her colleague, the kind of look people give when they are handling something fragile and unpredictable. Your mother is speaking with the attending psychiatrist right now. Mr. Hale is with her. I wanted to scream. Richard was already poisoning their minds, turning every lie into truth before I even had the chance to defend myself. My heart crashed painfully against my ribs, every beat filled with rage and fear. The nurse adjusted my IV line as if she sensed my panic. Everything is okay. We just want to make sure you are safe. Safe from what? From me. From the hallucinations Richard invented. From the false records he forged. I tried to pull the IV out, but my hand was too weak. Please, I whispered, trying to sound sane, rational human. He drugged me. He injected me with something. You have to listen. The nurse placed a hand on my shoulder gentle, like I was a frightened child. Olivia, the police report states that you were found delirious and incoherent. Mr. Hale said he saw the syringe in your hand. Syringe in my hand. That monster. He planted it on me. He staged everything. The nurse continued. He is very worried about you. He said your behavior has been unstable for months. My breath hitched. Gaslighting. Manipulation. Lies building walls around me brick by brick. If they labeled me crazy, I would lose everything. My freedom. My inheritance. My life. Olivia, try to rest. When the doctor finishes speaking with your mother, they will come talk to you. Rest. As if sleep could fix the world collapsing around me. When the nurses left, I clenched my fists around the thin blanket and stared at the ceiling, fighting the urge to rip every wire and tube off my body. I needed clarity. I needed strength. I needed someone to believe me. The door opened and my mother, Joanne, rushed in, eyes swollen from crying. Olivia, honey, thank God you are awake. She grabbed my hands as if she were terrified they would vanish. But she did not defend me. She did not ask what happened. She only asked the one question Richard had taught her to fear. Why would you do this to yourself? My heart shattered deeper than any wound Richard ever inflicted. Mom, he did this to me. He drugged me. He wants to take everything. Please believe me. She shook her head, trembling. Richard is trying to protect you. He said you have not been yourself. He said you are paranoid about him, about us. She was repeating his script word for word. My mother had become his puppet, and I was the monster he told her to fear. I leaned closer, my voice desperate. Mom, he wants me declared incompetent. He wants Dad's property. He wants every dime I have. He is dangerous. Joanne's lips quivered, but fear chained her thoughts. She stepped back as if my truth was a threat. Richard appeared in the doorway, his expression calm, triumphant. He rested a hand on my mother's shoulder like a proud handler taming a wild animal. See, sweetheart, how agitated she gets. This is what I have been telling you. The doctor will handle everything now. I stared at him, my blood screaming with silent rage. He thought he had me. He thought I was trapped. He thought the world would believe him, but I knew something he could never control. I was not alone. I had a friend who knew the truth, and I was coming back for him. The poison in Richard's lies spread faster than the drug in my veins ever could. By the time the psychiatrist entered my room with a clipboard tucked under his arm, my fate was nearly sealed. His glasses slid down his nose as he looked at me like I was a puzzle piece forced into the wrong place. Olivia. I want to talk about what happened, he said, with a tone so rehearsed it could have been copied from a training manual. Before I could answer, Richard stepped forward smoothly. Doctor, she has been struggling for months, sleepless nights, accusations that make no sense. She thinks I want to hurt her. He smiled sadly as if burdened by the responsibility of caring for an ungrateful child. My hands curled into fists beneath the sheets. I tried to speak calmly because one wrong tone would become evidence against my sanity. Doctor, that man injected me with something. You need to test me. Richard shook his head, pitying me. She is confused. She has always been confused. Confused. The word stabbed deeper than any needle. The psychiatrist asked questions designed to trap me. Have you felt unsafe in your own home? Have you experienced paranoia recently? Do you believe people are trying to control your thoughts? Of course I felt unsafe. Of course people were trying to control me. The truth sounded just like insanity when spoken aloud. Richard moved around the room, quietly observing, waiting for the moment I slipped. The doctor scribbled notes, faster and faster. The walls closed in, and I understood if I did not get out quickly, I would disappear behind medication and padded rooms forever. Then the door cracked open, and a familiar voice cut through the suffocating fog. "Olivia." It was Evelyn. Her dark hair was pulled back in a tight bun, her hospital badge visible. She had rushed here on her break because she saw the emergency alert during her shift. I had never been so relieved to see anyone in my life. She walked up to my bedside, her eyes analyzing every detail of my condition. "Olivia, do you remember what happened?" I looked directly at her and nodded. "Yes, he injected me with something." Evelyn's jaw tightened. She turned toward the doctor. "Did you run a tox screen?" The psychiatrist hesitated. "We assumed it was self-administered." Evelyn's professional tone sharpened like a blade. "You assumed. A toxicology panel must be run immediately." The psychiatrist cleared his throat, uncomfortable. "Of course we will request that." Richard stepped in, voice suddenly sharp. "There is no need for unnecessary tests. She needs psychiatric care, not medical procedures." Evelyn faced him with a steadiness that rattled him. "Why are you so eager to stop us from finding out what she was given?" My mother wrung her hands, torn between fear and truth. Richard placed an arm around her shoulders, tightening his grip when she wavered. The doctor reluctantly ordered the tests, and Evelyn promised she would oversee them herself. Richard leaned over me, his whisper like a serpent curling around my ear. "You think she can save you? No one will believe you. You already look insane." The promise of losing everything hung heavy in the air. My father's house, my freedom, my identity. Richard left the room, satisfied with the destruction he had built. My mother lingered in the doorway, eyes shimmering with uncertainty. "Mom, please believe me," I begged. Joanne stepped back, as if belief was the most dangerous thing she could hold. She let Richard pull her away. Evelyn waited until the door closed, then leaned close. "I believe you." The words hit harder than any drug. She examined the mark on my arm near the injection. "Olivia, this bruise is not self-inflicted. I know what restraint medication looks like." This was a forced dose. Relief collided with anger in my chest. Someone finally saw me. Someone finally listened. Evelyn lowered her voice. "Richard is hiding something bigger than we think. We have to move fast. I am going to help you prove he is lying. He wants to declare you incompetent, but he just made the biggest mistake of his life." I gripped her hand, fingers trembling not from fear, but from the fire returning to my veins. Richard thought he already won. My stepfather thought I was broken. He thought no one would ever take my side. He had no idea I was just getting started. The next morning, I was wheeled into a small consultation room with light so bright it made everyone look like a ghost. The toxicology results lay inside a sealed envelope on the table. Evelyn stood beside me, arms crossed, eyes locked on the psychiatrist like she was daring him to lie. Richard and my mother sat across from us. My mother clutched her purse with both hands as if holding on to the last piece of stability she had left. Richard rested comfortably in his chair legs, crossed, confidence oozing from his posture. He believed this would be the moment that confirmed his victory over me. The psychiatrist opened the envelope, his eyes scanning the results. He paused for a beat, then looked up, clearly unsettled. "There are high levels of benzodiazepines in her system. The dose appears excessive and inconsistent with self-administration." My pulse kicked hard. Evelyn leaned forward, voice low but victorious. "Meaning someone injected her?" Richard's mask cracked for half a second. Just half a second, but it was enough to see the monster beneath. He recovered quickly with a sigh. "Doctor, she has access to her mother's anxiety medication at home. She must have taken them impulsively. You said yourself she has been agitated." Evelyn cut him off sharply. "There are injection marks. Do you care to explain how someone injects pills into their bloodstream?" Silence. For the first time, Richard did not have a rehearsed explanation. The psychiatrist shifted uncomfortably, his certainty shaken. "We need to proceed carefully," he murmured. "Until we understand exactly what happened, we cannot assume psychiatric intent." I clung to that sentence like a life raft. It was the first crack in Richard's fortress. Evelyn was just getting started. She opened a folder she had brought tucked against her chest. Inside were printed pages highlighted in yellow. I took the liberty of looking into Olivia's past medical records. According to the system, she has been treated for delusional disorder for 2 years. Joanne gasped. "That is impossible. She has never been treated for anything like that." Evelyn slid the papers onto the table. "Exactly. These records were altered. Someone added false entries and prescriptions. Someone with access and motive." Richard glared at her. "You are accusing me based on what speculation?" Evelyn matched his stare. "Not speculation. Patterns. Every suspicious entry occurred after a visit from you or after paperwork you handled." The room temperature seemed to drop. My mother looked between us, desperately trying to stitch together truth from fear. Richard reached for her hand, but she didn't grab his. A small but powerful shift. The psychiatrist cleared his throat. "There is enough inconsistency in these documents that I cannot declare her incompetent. We will need an investigation." Richard's jaw tightened so hard I could hear his teeth grind. He stood abruptly, nearly knocking over his chair. "This is absurd. Olivia is a danger to herself and others. We have to protect her before she hurts someone." I raised my chin, forcing strength into my voice despite the tremor. "The only danger here is you. You want everything my father left us. You want control over my mother. You want the money, the land, the security. And you think making me look insane will hand it all to you." My words trembled in the sterile air hanging between truth and terror. My mother pressed a hand to her chest, eyes brimming with tears. "Olivia, please do not do this," Joanne whispered. I shook my head. "Mom, he has been isolating you, lying to you, manipulating you. He wants you to sign the property into his name. He wants me locked away. He will not stop until he has every last piece of our lives." Joanne looked at Richard, pleading for reassurance. "Tell me she is lying." Richard's voice darkened into a sharp command. "Do not listen to her. She is sick." He pointed at me like I was some filthy stain ruining his perfect version of reality. Evelyn stepped between us, blocking his rage. "No! She is not sick. She is a victim." Richard lunged forward as if ready to silence her with his hands, an instinctual burst of violence that revealed everything. Security guards rushed in, grabbing him by the arms, pulling him back. As they did, his eyes met mine. Pure hatred. But beneath it, something new. Fear. He finally understood that his plan was no longer flawless, and that I was not the weak, helpless pawn he thought I was. I would expose him. I would take my life back. And he knew it. The moment they dragged Richard out of the room, the walls stopped closing in on me. For the first time since this nightmare began, the ground under my feet felt like it belonged to me again. The psychiatrist called for a short recess to allow everyone to collect themselves, though everyone knew the break was for one person, only Joanne. Sinclair, my mother, who suddenly had to confront the horrifying truth she had been refusing to see. She sat frozen, staring at the double doors Richard had vanished through. Her hands trembled, clutching a used tissue. I wanted to hug her, to tell her everything would be okay. Yet a bitter part of me whispered she let him do this. Evelyn knelt next to her and spoke gently. "Joanne, you are not to blame for his abuse. He is dangerous and manipulative. You trusted him because you believed he loved you. That is not a crime." Mom turned toward me, and something inside me broke. "My daughter," she whispered in a small, choked voice. "I failed you." Her voice cracked into tiny pieces. I wanted to tell her that the only person to blame was the monster pacing behind locked doors, not her soft heart that loved too easily. But before I could speak, an announcement blared overhead. "Code Gray in Wing B. Security assistance needed." That was Richard. I closed my eyes. The beast was still roaring. When the recess ended, the psychiatrist wasted no time. He signed emergency protection orders preventing Richard from making any medical or legal decisions on my behalf. Evelyn looked triumphant. Joanne looked devastated. And me. For the first time, I felt the lights of the world flicker back on. It did not last long. A police officer arrived requesting my statement regarding Richard's assault and the forced injections Evelyn urged me not to answer yet without legal counsel present. My mother startled. Police? Is that necessary? Evelyn stood firm. He drugged her. He tried to institutionalize her. He physically assaulted her in the lobby last night. Yes, it is necessary. Joanne's breath shook like the world around her might collapse. That is when the psychiatrist looked at her directly. Ma'am, there is another concern. According to records, Mr. Mercer has control over your finances, your house titles, and health decision documentation. My body stiffened. This was worse than I thought. Evelyn asked the question first. How much control? All of it, the doctor answered. He filed paperwork last year naming himself primary authority. That cannot be true, Mom whispered. I never signed anything like that. Evelyn spread more documents on the table like playing cards in a cruel game. He forged your signature, Joanne. He likely planned to get a judge to confirm Olivia incompetent so you would be next. He would cut you off from everything. My mother covered her mouth as a soft whine of horror escaped her. The ground under her cracked wide open. The psychiatrist cleared his throat. I have no authority to undo legal documents, but I highly recommend contacting law enforcement and a fraud investigator immediately. We will keep Olivia here safe from any further interference until a new psychiatric review is completed. That was when something cold and metallic slid into my stomach. Safe here. Safe in the place Richard tried to bury me in. My brain raced. If I stayed too long here, he could twist something again, find another angle, another lie. But Evelyn was already prepared for the next step. She squeezed my hand and whispered low, Trust me, Olivia. I am not letting him win. They moved me to a private secure hospital room. A guard posted outside my door, a camera in the corner blinking a small red dot like a heartbeat of paranoia. My ribs still ached. My mind was a battlefield. The nurse checked my IV, adjusting medication that soothed the chemical chaos inside my veins. Alone under the cold hospital lights, I finally had space to think. Richard was losing control, and people like him do not lose gracefully. He would escalate. He would come back harder. This wasn't over, not even close. I pressed my palm to my chest, willing myself not to shake. He wanted me helpless, broken, silenced. I would become his worst nightmare instead. I would expose him in court. I would reclaim everything he stole. He thought he could label me insane and lock me away forever. He should have killed me while he had the chance, because now I was awake. Now I was angry. Now I was unstoppable. That night, I pretended to sleep while every nerve in my body stayed wired tight, listening for footsteps in the hallway, searching for shadows under the door. The heart monitor beeped softly beside me like a countdown. My ribs throbbed with every breath, but the pain kept me awake and alert. I wasn't safe here, even with the guard, because Richard's power didn't come from strength alone. It came from lies and influence and the way he wrapped his poison around the minds of others. He could convince anyone he was the victim. My phone buzzed on the bedside table. Evelyn had convinced the attending social worker to return it to me since I wasn't under any psychiatric hold. Unknown number. My stomach iced over. I answered anyway, but didn't speak. Olivia, honey, please listen to me. My mother's voice trembled through the speaker, and I closed my eyes against the flood of emotions. Mom, where are you? At home. They sent Richard to a different ward for evaluation, but Olivia, he is furious. He said her voice broke off into shaking breaths. He said he is going to fight back with everything he has. I bit the inside of my cheek until I tasted blood. Of course he was. Monsters don't surrender. Mom, you cannot be alone with him again. Lock the doors. Call the police if he shows up. Her whisper cracked. I already did. They put a patrol car outside. But Olivia, you need to be very careful. He said he will make sure you never see freedom again. That line hit me like scissors cutting the thread of calm I barely held. Before I could respond, another voice entered the call. Strong, steady. Evelyn, Joanne, I need you to stay calm. Do not contact Richard. Do not go anywhere alone. You and Olivia are both under protective review. Do you understand? My mother sniffled. Yes. I understand. The call ended, but silence didn't return. Instead, it felt like the walls were whispering warnings. A nurse came in to check my vitals. Lean, tall, a cap covering her bright red hair. I hadn't seen her before. She smiled too warmly. How are we feeling tonight, Miss Sinclair? I didn't answer. The instinct in my bones told me danger was wearing a nurse's badge. She adjusted the IV bag, though it didn't need adjusting. Her fingers lingered on it too long. I stared at her hands, then at her eyes. They flickered with recognition. Richard must have sent her. My voice was hoarse. I want Evelyn Miller contacted immediately. Nurse Red Lips froze for just a second, and that second confirmed everything. She forced another smile. Of course, dear. I'll let her know you asked for her. She left, not hurried, but not slow either. My breath came sharp. I pressed the call button repeatedly until the guard stepped in. There was a nurse who just came in. I said quickly, she wasn't supposed to be here. Can you make sure she's authorized? The guard nodded and left. Minutes passed. Long, slow, suffocating minutes. Then Evelyn burst through the door with her badge swinging against her chest. Her voice was calm in tone only. What happened? I told her about the woman. Her jaw set hard. That nurse doesn't work here. My pulse jackhammered inside my ribs. I knew it! Evelyn called hospital security immediately, and 2 officers ran down the hall in the direction the woman had gone. The guard returned sweating slightly. Cameras show she walked straight out the staff exit and disappeared into the parking garage. I shivered so violently the bed rattled. Evelyn grabbed my hand. Olivia, listen to me. You need to be moved tonight. Somewhere Richard and anyone working for him cannot reach you. She made a series of calls fast, like a general commanding troops. A patient transport ambulance arrived under false documentation a few minutes later. I changed into plain clothes Evelyn brought from a storage locker, a hoodie and soft pants that didn't scream patient. As they lowered the bed rails, I stared at the empty hallway. He sent someone to finish what he started. He really wants me gone. Evelyn leaned close, voice fierce and low. That means he is losing. That means you fight harder. They strapped me into the ambulance gurney and closed the doors. The world outside was dark and full of unseen eyes. Every engine rumble sounded like a predator approaching. My ribs hurt, my brain buzzed, and fear dug claws into my spine. But under it all, something else flamed brighter. Fury, determination, a promise. I would survive. I would expose him. I would burn his empire of lies to the ground. As the ambulance pulled away, the last image I saw was the hospital entrance reflected in the window, a sanctuary turned hunting ground disappearing behind us. I exhaled a single vow into the night air. Richard Mercer will never touch me again. The ambulance bounced along the dark road, the interior lit only by a dim orange bulb that made everything look sickly and unreal. I gripped the gurney rails with both hands, every vibration stabbing my ribs like knives. The paramedic riding with me was a middle-aged woman with kind brown eyes and a badge that actually matched the hospital database on Evelyn's phone. Her presence steadied me slightly, but fear still sat heavy in my throat. Where are we going? I whispered. A private, secure facility under police oversight. Evelyn answered from the passenger seat, turning to face me. No one can access you without clearance. Not Richard, not his hired hands, not even your mother until we confirm she is safe too. The ambulance slowed as we pulled past a checkpoint guarded by 2 officers in tactical vests. They opened a steel gate and waved us through. For a moment, it felt like entering a military base. They transferred me into a private room with bulletproof windows, a locked medication cabinet, and no unmonitored entry points. A police officer stood outside my door. Anyone who wanted to harm me would have to get through him, the cameras, and Evelyn. For the first time in days, I tasted something like safety. It was bitter, like relief laced with fear. Evelyn stayed with me as a doctor evaluated my injuries again. Then she pulled up a chair and laid out her plan. Olivia listened closely. Richard forged documents. He coordinated medical fraud. He drugged you and attempted to commit you to gain full control of your inheritance. We nearly have enough to bring felony charges, but nearly isn't enough. We need evidence that ties every step directly to him. My heart thudded. What kind of evidence? Evelyn opened a folder full of printed emails, glossy black and white photos, and legal papers. This man documented everything while thinking he was too clever to be caught. These are bank statements showing payments to a nurse who disappeared after your first panic attack last year. The same nurse who wrote the first fake psychiatric note. My blood chilled. He has been planning this since the moment he married my mother. Longer. Evelyn tapped another page. These recordings from your father's lawyer show Richard demanded access to the estate the week after your father died. Your father refused. Then 2 months later, your father's accident happened. The lights in the room buzzed loudly the way electricity sounds when it wants to start a fire. Accident. I repeated the word like something sharp cutting my tongue. Evelyn didn't say it outright, but the implication was there, a shadow crawling across the truth. I shook my head, refusing to drown in that new horror. What do I have to do? I asked, even though part of me already knew. Evelyn's eyes were relentless but kind. You have to testify. You have to stand in court, describe everything he did to you. Every bruise, every injection, every threat, every lie. Only your voice can show a jury who he really is. The thought of facing him again made bile rise in my throat. I could still feel his fingers on my skin, still hear him calling me insane. But I would not let that fear decide my future anymore. I nodded slowly. I will testify. Evelyn exhaled a long breath like she had been holding it for hours. That is enough for tonight, she said. Rest. You are safer than you have been in months. The guard switched with another at midnight. Cameras hummed. The world quieted down. Yet sleep refused to come. Too many horrors waited behind my eyelids. At 2:13 in the morning, the silence shattered. A phone rang at the officer's desk right outside my door. His voice low urgent, then louder. What hospital? When? Who authorized that? My pulse spiked. Something bad had happened. He stepped inside, pale. Miss Sinclair, you need to stay calm. Your mother has been admitted to County General. They found her unconscious after a fall in the kitchen. Cold tore through me. That was no accident. The paramedic returned, tightening my straps on the chair as if expecting me to bolt. Evelyn looked as though she had been stabbed. Richard must have gotten to her, she whispered. They think she overdosed, but I know better. My knees buckled and I grabbed the bed rail. I was safe now, but Mom wasn't, and nothing could stop him from finishing what he started. I stared at the door like it was the mouth of hell. He hurt me and failed. So he went after the person I loved most. The fear inside me hardened into a blade. I was done hiding. He wanted a war. He just got one. The drive to County General felt like racing death itself. The secure transport vehicle sped through the empty streets, sirens off, so we would not attract attention, which only made the dread worse, because silence can scream louder than alarms. Evelyn sat beside me, scrolling through legal contacts and law enforcement numbers, trying to get ahead of whatever trap Richard had set. My ribs burned with every bump, but adrenaline forced the pain aside. I pressed my forehead to the window, searching the darkness for any sign of him, convinced he lurked somewhere just out of sight, laughing at how easily he could rip apart my world. When we arrived, police tape already covered the hallway to my mother's room. Officers stood guard outside, speaking in low voices that carried bad news before a single word was spoken. A detective approached us, a stocky woman with silver streaks in her hair and an expression that had seen too many tragedies to flinch at another. Olivia Sinclair, she confirmed with a nod. I am Detective Ruiz. I understand you believe your mother's fall was not accidental. Believe is too soft a word. My voice came out hard and sharp despite the tremor in it. Richard Mercer hurt her. He is trying to kill us both. The detective studied my face, looking for delusion or truth, and finding only terror too raw to fake. Let me show you something, she said, guiding us forward. Through the window, I could see my mother lying pale and still, her head wrapped in bandages, machines breathing for her. A nurse adjusted the ventilator, whispering something too quiet to hear. My knees almost gave out. Detective Ruiz lowered her voice. There were signs of forced entry into the house. The patio door was shattered. Your mother also has bruises on her arms consistent with being grabbed or shaken, and the so-called medication overdose does not match any prescription she has. A quiet rage lit inside my chest, rising hotter than fear. Where is he? Where is Richard? Ruiz's jaw tightened. He has not been seen since he was released from medical observation earlier tonight. Claims of chest pains. The doctors let him go before the hold order cleared. Evelyn swore under her breath, slamming her folder against the wall. Of course he lied. That is what he does. Ruiz nodded grimly. Officers are actively searching. We have issued a bulletin. He is now wanted for questioning in a suspected homicide attempt and medical fraud. But be aware he is unpredictable and dangerous. Dangerous was too mild a word for a man who injected me with sedatives and left my mother battered in a hospital bed. I moved closer to the glass, pressing my palm against it, wishing she could feel my touch. The monitor beeped, slow, steady, but frighteningly weak. Evelyn put a hand on my shoulder, grounding me. She is alive, Olivia. That means we still have time. Time for what? To save her. To destroy him. Ruiz stepped between us, turning to face me fully. Miss Sinclair, I need to ask you something difficult but important. Have you ever seen Richard with a syringe before the night he drugged you? My pulse kicked up as memories flickered back in jagged fragments. Cabinets locked suddenly. A sharps disposal bin I never questioned. A first aid kit he always kept near him. The answer was yes. Too many times. I nodded. Ruiz jotted notes fast. That places access to controlled medical supplies directly in his hands. That makes this premeditated. Evelyn straightened, eyes blazing with the certainty of a woman who has chosen her side. We need full protective custody for Olivia immediately. Ruiz agreed and signaled to the officers. 2 remained by my side, while others formed a perimeter around the unit. The entire floor became a fortress with my mother and me at the center of the war zone. Then the lights flickered. Once. Twice. Everything went black. A chorus of alarms exploded in the darkness. Nurses scrambled, panicked voices overlapping. My chest seized with pure terror. Evelyn grabbed my wrist. Stay behind me! Ruiz drew her gun flashlight beam, cutting through the dark. A generator hummed awake and emergency lights snapped on, casting the hall in a red glow like spilled blood. Down the corridor, a fire exit door swung slightly as if someone had just passed through. Ruiz shouted for her team, and they sprinted after the movement, disappearing into the stairwell. Evelyn squeezed my hand hard. This was him, she whispered. He is here. He is not running. He is hunting. And suddenly I understood with bone-deep certainty. Richard was not trying to escape. He had come to finish what he started. The hallway seemed to pulse with danger, every red emergency light flash making shadows jump like predators ready to pounce. The officer beside me kept his hand over his holster, eyes sweeping every corner. Evelyn whispered into her phone, demanding backup, while the static in her voice betrayed that even she feared what would happen if Richard reached either of us first. Then the sound came, a metallic crash from somewhere behind my mother's room, followed by the slow squeak of a gurney wheel. I felt the blood drain from my face. He was moving her, trying to steal her while everyone panicked in the dark. The guard rushed forward with his flashlight out, and Evelyn grabbed my arm, tugging me along because she knew I would never stay behind while my mother was in danger. We turned the corner and saw the empty hospital bed frame pushed out of my mother's room, the sheets dragging across the floor. A faint trail of IV tubing led down the hall like a breadcrumb trail of horror. Detective Ruiz burst through a side door, breathless gun raised. "He is here," she said through clenched teeth. "He is disguised as staff. He knocked out the real nurse assigned to your mother and replaced her wristband with a tracker. He is trying to move her into the service elevator before anyone notices." My heart hammered so loudly that it drowned out everything but the vow screaming inside me. He will not take her. We ran. Pain shot through my ribs with each step, but adrenaline carried me forward. We reached the service elevator just as its doors began to close. Ruiz lunged, jamming her arm inside, forcing the doors apart with a furious grunt. Inside, Richard stood hunched over my mother's gurney. A surgical mask covered half his face, But his eyes, those dead cold eyes, met mine, and every nightmare he ever gave me erupted to the surface. He held a syringe in his fist, the needle glittering beneath the harsh lights like a weapon designed for one purpose. Endings. Do not take another step, or she dies, he growled, his voice low and animalistic. Ruiz raised her gun, sight locked on his head. Drop the syringe and put your hands in the air. Richard laughed. You really think she deserves to live after what she has done? She is a traitor. She betrayed me. Olivia, don't you see this is all your fault? My breath stuttered, but I forced myself to stand my ground. You did this. You destroyed our family. You tried to erase me. I am not insane, Richard. You are. He snarled, then positioned the syringe over my mother's IV port. One press of his thumb, and she would never wake up. My legs nearly folded beneath the weight of fear, but something far stronger took hold. Rage. I stepped into the elevator, ignoring Ruiz's frantic whisper to stay back. Richard's eyes widened, surprised I would walk straight into the lion's throat. You think I am afraid of dying? I said, voice trembling with fury. I would rather die fighting than live one more day under your control. Ruiz took advantage of his momentary distraction. She fired. The bullet grazed Richard's shoulder, spinning him sideways. The syringe flew from his hand, clattering against the floor. He roared in pain and launched himself at her, knocking the gun loose. They tumbled into the hallway, fists and elbows flying. Evelyn rushed to my mother, ripping away the loose restraints. The gurney rolled backward as she pushed with every ounce of her strength. I grabbed the IV pole, dragging it along to keep the line from tearing out violently. Security swarmed seconds later, pulling Richard off Ruiz and slamming him face down onto the cold linoleum. He screamed curses, promising revenge, threatening to bury us all. I watched as they cuffed him, and for the first time in my life, I didn't feel small in front of him. I felt powerful. He had lost control. Ruiz pressed her knee into his back to hold him still while she read him his rights. Richard Mercer, you are under arrest for attempted murder, aggravated assault, medical fraud, and kidnapping. Richard twisted his head, trying to glare at me one last time. You are nothing without me. I took a step closer so he could see every ounce of truth in my eyes. No, I am finally everything without you. They dragged him away, still shouting insane threats that no longer held any power. Evelyn guided my mother and me toward a new secure room farther from the chaos. The sirens faded. The shouting died. The nightmare monster was caged, but the war was not over. Tomorrow would not be about survival. Tomorrow would be about justice, and I was ready to testify. Courtrooms look clean and calm on television, but in reality they feel like arenas where people bleed through their words instead of their skin. The day of the hearing arrived faster than my heart could prepare for. Reporters pressed against the barricades outside, snapping photos as the police escorted me and Evelyn through a back entrance to avoid Richard's supporters and his smug defense team waiting to tear apart my credibility. My ribs still ached with every breath, but I wore a dark blue suit that Evelyn helped me pick out something that made me feel unbreakable. Inside the courtroom, I saw Richard seated in a crisp gray suit ironed to perfection, like he was attending a business meeting instead of being judged for attempted murder. He looked thinner, more dangerous, like desperation had sharpened him into pure malice. His eyes found mine, a silent threat slithering between us, but I refused to look away. The judge entered, and the room settled into a hush heavy enough to smother anyone weak of will. Detective Ruiz testified first, her voice firm and steady as she outlined his forged medical documents, the access to controlled substances, and his attempt to remove my mother from her hospital bed. Then Evelyn took the stand, delivering every detail of his manipulation, as if she were constructing a perfect legal trap brick by brick. Richard's lawyer objected again and again, but the judge's patience was thin. When it was finally my turn to testify, my hands shook so badly I thought I might drop the microphone. The clerk swore me in and I sat down, breathing slow, determined breaths. The prosecutor asked me to recount everything from the first time Richard implied I was unstable to the night he injected me. My voice wavered at times, but I kept speaking because every truth I told took another piece of power away from him and gave it back to me. When I described waking up strapped to the hospital bed, the toxicity results proving forced, drugging the nurse imposter, and of course the attack on my mother, several jurors clenched their jaws and glanced toward Richard with visible disgust. Then came the moment I feared most. Cross-examination. Richard's attorney walked toward me with a smile that pretended concern but carried a scalpel beneath. Miss Sinclair, you claim your stepfather injected you with sedatives, but is it possible you took your mother's medication yourself during one of your episodes? Episodes. The word hit like a slap. I lifted my chin. I never had episodes until he created them with drugs. The attorney looked delighted by the tension. Stress can cause memory lapses. Perhaps you hallucinated his involvement. I leaned forward, gripping the edge of the witness stand until my knuckles ached. I did not hallucinate a man injecting me. I did not hallucinate my mother unconscious and bleeding. He tried to erase me. He failed. My voice cracked, yet somehow grew stronger. The lawyer tried to twist my words again, but every attempt snapped back against him as Ruiz's evidence and hospital security footage disproved each lie. Eventually, he gave up frustrated and sat down in a huff. The judge called a brief recess before closing arguments. I stepped outside with Evelyn, who squeezed my shoulder proud and protective like a shield made of flesh and loyalty. "You did everything right," she whispered. "You tore down his mask." I wanted to believe her, but fear still gnawed at the edges of hope, because justice is never guaranteed no matter how much truth you bleed. When we returned, the prosecutor delivered a closing statement that painted Richard not as a misguided husband, but as a calculated predator who exploited grief and trust to destroy a family for money. The defense sputtered something about mental health misunderstandings and a fractured family narrative, but their words tasted weak even to them. The jury left to deliberate. Minutes stretched into hours. My ribs ached. My throat was raw. I stared at the clock like I could force time to make the right decision. Then the bailiff stepped forward. "The jury has reached a verdict." My heart stopped. Richard leaned back smugly as if convinced he had charmed fate. The foreperson stood with a sheet of paper in hand. "On the charge of attempted murder, we find the defendant guilty." Richard's face finally cracked. The crowd gasped. The verdict continued: guilty on aggravated assault, guilty on medical fraud, guilty on kidnapping, guilty on every count. My breath rushed out in a sob of pure release. The judge ordered immediate remand with no bail pending sentencing. Officers stepped toward him, but before they could grab him, he twisted and screamed at me, a sound ripped from a monster unwilling to die. "You think this is over? I will destroy you." But his threats no longer carried teeth. The handcuffs did. The sentencing felt like the last slow breath of a storm that had raged for months, a ritual where words finally became consequence, and the air in the courtroom tasted like both victory and grief. The judge called the court to order and asked if anyone wished to speak before the sentence. My hands trembled, but my legs did not. I rose and walked to the podium with Evelyn at my side like a steady anchor. I had rehearsed what I would say until the words felt raw and true rather than a performance, but nothing could prepare me for the flood of memory that came back the moment I looked at Richard cuffed across the room. He sat with a mask of defiance that had been shredded by truth. His shoulders slumped, the arrogance gone replaced by something smaller and rawer. I began to speak, and my voice carried through the room, slow, precise, and finally unashamed. I told the judge about the needle on my kitchen floor, about waking in a hospital that smelled like antiseptic and betrayal, about the nights I could not sleep because I was afraid he would come back for me or for Mom. I told them about the forged documents designed to turn me into a ghost and the way he had smiled when he thought he had condemned me. I did not hold back the shame I had felt when my mother, confused and frightened, repeated his lies. I said his name aloud, and I named his deeds. And for the first time, I reclaimed the voice he tried to steal. My words were a ledger of pain and proof the judge would keep in mind. Detective Ruiz provided a succinct account of the investigation, the cameras, the planted nurse, the banking traces tying him to payments to accomplices. Evelyn read medical reports showing forced sedatives and the toxicology analysis that could not be explained away. The prosecutor laid out the pattern of premeditation, the financial motive, the systematic attempts to seize control of the estate. The defense tried to argue a fractured family narrative and mental health confusion, but the jury's verdict had already carved the truth into the record. The judge listened, folding his hands, then looking down at the long stack of charges. "You attempted to murder your stepdaughter, and you attempted to murder your wife," he said in a voice that contained neither relish nor cruelty, just a solemn weight. "You used your knowledge, access, and the trust of those who loved you to commit a campaign of deception, coercion, and violence aimed at taking another person's life and fortune. For the attempted murder, aggravated assault, kidnapping, medical fraud, and forging legal documents, the court sentences you to 25 years in state prison with no possibility of parole for 10 years. The words landed hard and final like a gavel striking bone. Gasps and sobs rippled through the gallery. Some people bowed their heads, others wept openly. Joanne sobbed into a tissue, her shoulders shaking, but there was a clarity in her eyes that had not been there before, as if a thick web had been burned away, and behind it, something raw and human was exposed. Richard tried to speak, but the judge raised a hand. "There will be no more words to manipulate here." The court also ordered immediate asset freezes pending civil recovery that would allow Olivia to bring a suit to reclaim any transfers and to seek restitution for medical expenses, emotional trauma, and for setting up protections for others targeted like this. The prosecutor requested a restraining order that barred Richard from any contact with Joanne and required him to surrender any fiduciary documents. The bailiff led him away, and for a moment his chained figure seemed small and mortal, and not the invincible predator he had pretended to be. Outside the courthouse, cameras flashed and a crowd murmured. People I did not know approached me with quiet words of thanks and stories of their own narrow escapes. A woman gripped my hand and said, "Your courage saved me." In the following days, civil attorneys filed emergency motions to void the forged paperwork and to place the estate in a protective trust, pending a full forensic accounting. Bank accounts Richard had secreted were frozen. The local news ran pieces about elder abuse, medical fraud, and the insidiousness of those who weaponize institutions to take what is not theirs. I gave a few short interviews refusing to sensationalize the pain, but insisting on making the pattern visible so others would see the warning signs. Joanne moved in with me for the first few weeks after release from the hospital and began therapy with a specialist in abuse and codependency. And while it broke my heart to watch her grieve what she had believed she had chosen, it also warmed me to see her begin to untangle the loyalty from the manipulation. At night, she would hold my hand and whisper, "I am so sorry," and I would answer, "I know," and we would sit in the quiet rebuilding trust brick by cautious brick. Evelyn arranged for temporary funding through a victims assistance program, and we met with lawyers to set the foundation of the nonprofit I had been dreaming about in the nights I could not sleep. I filed the civil suit, and it moved aggressively. Forensic accountants traced transfers subpoenas, flew accomplices were identified and charged with lesser counts for their roles. The legal wheels groaned but turned, and each motion felt like pulling another shackle from my family. Richard's letters from jail arrived briefly and predictably, full of venom and denial. I read one aloud to the prosecutor, then handed the rest to the papers without comment. He threatened revenge and to ruin my reputation, but the man who had once thought he could erase me now sat in a cell where his threats sounded like the hollow echoes of a man who had lost everything real. The sentence did not erase the nights or the scars, but the law had spoken, and for the first time since the needle plunged into my arm, I felt legitimate in my pain and righteous in my survival. Healing does not arrive with the slamming of a courtroom door. It comes slowly in waves that sometimes lift you high and sometimes knock you breathless against the memory of what almost ended you. The months after Richard's sentencing were quiet in comparison, but silence can feel frightening when you have spent too long expecting danger behind every sound. I slept lightly, flinching whenever a branch brushed the window or a car passed too slowly down my street. My ribs healed faster than my trust in the world, but every morning I woke up breathing, which meant one more day he failed to destroy me. Joanne and I attended therapy together, learning how to talk without the shadow of a third voice twisting our words. She admitted how much guilt ate at her, and I learned to separate my anger at what happened from the person she was when she loved the wrong man. She returned to volunteering at the library, helping children learn to read, a small but powerful reminder that she still had goodness to offer the world, and that goodness had survived his control. Detective Ruiz checked in every few weeks with updates on the civil case properties, returned, fraudulent transfers, reversed accomplices sentenced to probation, and fines. Piece by piece, we took back what he tried to steal, including our dignity. One afternoon, Evelyn brought me an envelope containing the last notarized document Richard forged. I stared at his fake signature written over my father's legacy, and I felt no fear, no tremor, just anger turned into strength. I burned that document in the backyard while my mother stood beside me, and the ashes rose into the sky like part of him finally leaving our lives. The nonprofit I built in my father's and mother's names grew faster than I expected. Donations poured in from survivors who had read about my story, from nurses who saw cases like mine too often, from strangers who believed women deserved to be safe in their own homes. Our first grant paid for a legal advocate for a woman whose brother forged guardianship papers and tried to seize her disability checks. Our second paid for emergency housing for an elderly man pushed out of his home by a greedy nephew. Each life we touched stitched a little piece of my heart back together. 6 months after the sentencing, I sat with Mom in the garden Evelyn had helped us plant, and I realized we had rebuilt a home, not just a house. The breeze swayed the sunflowers, and Mom held a cup of tea with both hands. She watched me with soft eyes and said, "You saved me, Olivia." I shook my head. "We saved each other." She smiled, but then her voice changed, quieter, more vulnerable. "Do you ever think about what he might do when he gets out?" I inhaled slowly, feeling the old fear stir, but not take over. "He will still be behind bars when I am nearly 50 years old, and if he ever tries to find me again, he will face a woman who refuses to be prey." That answer made her cry, not with sadness, but with the relief of knowing we were no longer afraid of the same monster hiding in the dark. The seasons shifted. Summer warmed into autumn, and the leaves burned bright before falling. I visited my father's grave one cool October morning, carrying a single white lily and the pendant he gave me as a teenager. I placed the flower gently and whispered, "I did it, Dad. I kept us safe." The wind carried the words away like it wanted him to hear them wherever he was. On the anniversary of the day, Richard tried to have me institutionalized. Evelyn and I hosted a fundraiser for the foundation. Survivors spoke of their strength, lawyers spoke of reform, and Mom stood beside me, every step proud of the daughter she almost lost. When the event ended, Evelyn clinked her glass against mine. "You transformed your trauma into fire," she said. "You turned survival into a weapon for others." I thought of all the nights I lay awake imagining the worst, and all the mornings I fought through anyway. I wasn't just a survivor. I was a witness to my own resurrection. As the crowd thinned and the lights dimmed, I stepped outside, breathing in the crisp night air. For the first time, I felt truly safe in the world. My name is Olivia. I am 32 years old, and I am finally free to live the life he thought he could steal.